All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Quest for Success podcast. Today we have on a man. He is the Porterville Unified School District Athletic Director. He spent time as the Athletic Director at Wenatchee, over 20 years in the coaching field, and just a lot of successful teams and programs in the community of Porterville. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the man, the myth, the legend, AJ Watts to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Flattered to be here.
Yep. So let's talk shop, man. Let's get right into this. So we start off every episode with a mental minute.
Okay.
Let's do this with a pretty simple question. Who's your favorite baseball player and why?
So interesting enough, grew up in Terabella. Dad was an educator. Mom was a secretary, babysitter. We didn't have cable until the day that I graduated from high school. So to say, one baseball player, I wasn't watching a whole lot of baseball because we didn't have cable and it wasn't on TV. My dad was fortunate enough. He had quarter season tickets to the Dodgers. So I've been going down to Dodger Stadium since I was my kid's age. The first player I remember really enjoying watching and the way he went about his business was Ryan Sandberg. He was a second baseman. He probably profiled a little bit like me, shorter in stature, smaller. I don't know if he was ever, in the category of the greatest skill set, but I think he overachieved and, did a lot of good things with his skill set. So probably Ryan Sandberg.
Yeah.
AJ, you've spent over 20 years in coaching. Now you're directing athletics for the entire Porterville Unified School District. What is like your most proud? It could be coaching, playing, or directing. But what's your most proud moment thus far in your career?
It's hard to come up with one. The coaching side of things, all for different reasons. I had a team in 15, I had a team in 19, and I had a team in 22. And I want to be respectful to the teams before those teams, and the teams before them kind of led to 15, 19, 22.
Sure.
But all of those were accomplishments for different reasons. When I was at Porterville High, I inherited a program that was in good shape. It had some players. I think we won a conference championship in 12. And then in 15, it was my group. It was my freshmen that came in. I thought we had done a nice job of kind of bleeding them through the program and not rushing too many of them up, although we had a freshman up and the next year, we had a sophomore up, all leading to 15. We win a share of the conference championship. I had two pitchers on that team, just to give you an idea of that group. Andrew Whitten was a right-handed kid for us, 6'2", 6'3", tall, slender kid. I had a finesse left-hander in Peyton True. And at the time in the EYL, you played 10 conference games. So the quick math is, you got to collect 210 outs over 10 conference games, and those two guys collected 209 of the 210 outs.
That's a stat for you.
Yeah.
And the one out that they didn't collect, a kid named Darren Dashner came in a game against Larry Western at home where the game was in hand, and we just didn't have enough to beat him that day. And he actually gave up a hard line drive to the center fielder for the 210th out. But those two guys really were the middle of our team and did such a nice job on the mound for us. Had a kid named Angel Flores who went on to do really good things. Left-handed hitting, Zach Hernandez. I mean, it was a really good group, but it was my group when I took over a program that was in good shape. So that was an accomplishment on the coaching side. In 19, I took over at Wenatchee. In 17, we weren't very good. I had a good group of kids. We didn't win a whole lot of games. 18 was kind of the same scenario, although we improved win-loss wise. And then in 19, we were playing in the Pro PT that Kenny Searcy at Larry Western does such a nice job with, and he's done such a nice job for a long time. We get in the lower division championship game. We played a really good game. We win it. We win that tournament. And so things really started to change for us. At the time that tournament was going on that we won, I think we're tied for first, but we haven't played Porterville High twice and we haven't played Western twice. So we knew we had some things in front of us that were going to be difficult. I can't really remember how well we did against those two teams, but I know that we didn't finish in first. We got into the playoffs. We were facing a really good right-hander from Kingsburg. I got some advice from a coach in that conference on how to kind of combat him. It was flawless. It worked really well. We really had our way with them. The next game we played a tough Yosemite team where, they had runners in scoring position often and they just didn't get the big hit. And some of that was them, some of that was us. We made some big pitches in critical situations. And then in the Valley semifinals, we're at home against the Bakersfield Christian team, and they were fantastic. I mean, they had a lot of talent. They had a kid on the mound, last name's Langston. We knew we were going to get him. They had a third baseman who was a freshman at the time that ended up going to Cal Poly. They had personnel. They were a good team.
Right.
Yep.
And it got to a point in that game where, now we had sort of put in all of our stuff and 2 years later things are there and we were able to develop and stuff like that. And we're actually nobody out, runner at second. I have a catcher who we really liked. Didn't have the greatest body in the world. And I only bring this up because at the end of this, it should make sense. But we put a sack on, tried to move the runner over to third, and Bakersfield Christian, some exotic wheel play that really never works. And I knew that we had them in a bad spot because, you usually work on the wheel play when you're putting in your bunt coverages and then you never go back to it. So we're unsuccessful 0-2. Like I said, the catcher doesn't look like a kid that can handle the bat. And we put a sack bunt on with 2 strikes and they're completely out of sorts. Like I said, it's successful. We remove the runner over. I think we're down 2 or 1 to move him over, whatever the exact situation was. They get so frustrated and so out of whack, they actually tried to pick to third. And there's a balk to tie the game because the base wasn't occupied or whatever. And then a couple of hitters later or whatever, we hit a sac fly to win the game. And then, and I only bring all that stuff up and some of those details up because it was a thing where, okay, we're all on the same page. We all trust each other. If coach wants me to bunt with 2 strikes, I'll bunt with 2 strikes, and good for me. It all played out and it worked and we won. Mm-hmm. We beat a team that was skill set wise, that was better than us. And then in 22, we win a conference championship and I'm still at Menachie and we hadn't won one since 1999. And, it felt great to take those 3 teams and 3 different kind of scenarios and have relative success.
Yeah.
It was a good feeling.
Yeah. No, that's shoot, man. It's a lot of upcomings,
Yeah.
Right.
So this next question is for the athlete that's listening.
Okay.
Like Blaine mentioned earlier, you got 20 plus years of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure you have some favorite players, those kids that just, they're hard nosed, going to do what you say, never ask a question and just go all out. Right.
Mm-hmm. But
into more detail, what's your favorite kind of player?
The overachiever, you expect your shortstop, your 3-hitter, you expect these certain things from them and, stats and what they need to do to help you be successful. But my favorite player is just the guy that's present. Mm-hmm. He's present all the time. It's not that he's on time, but he's present. He's willing. He's, he will accept those challenges without question. And there's been so many of them. My teams, I even think our players, my former players would agree that most of the time we weren't the most talented team and we had to look at offense and scoring runs as a series of at-bats. It wasn't, okay, let's get the leadoff guy on, the 2-hitter on, and let's let the 3-hitter get 4 or 5 RBIs and try to win the game 6-2 or whatever. We had to be balanced. We had to have, expectations for everyone in our lineup. And when something was asked of you, we expected you to get it done, whether you had ego or not, because some of them do, and that's okay. You learn to manage that as you mature as a coach. Some of those teams I was talking about, even the 12 team, the 12, the 15, the 19, the 22, all those guys had to allow me to hold them back a little bit so that the team could be better. And then the key to all of that is that they don't understand at the time is if they do that, the all conference, the junior college recruiting, the small amount of guys that have had some Division I interest, all that takes care of itself.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to describe what my ideal player is or what my favorite player is. I mean, really, one makes the other one better,
Right.
So it's not a question of just one. It's a complementary thing.
Yeah. It's like a link of chains.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so there's no question, and there's a reason why you've been coaching for over 20 years. And you kind of briefly mentioned some of those teams that did struggle. You weren't always the most talented team, and you had to work and move some guys around to benefit the entire team. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of times when we look at successful coaches, we look at coaches that are able to, bring struggling teams up or respond to things, right? So what approach do you take when your team is struggling, they're down, and you're trying to rebuild perhaps? What is that kind of approach that you take?
I don't know if there's a clear answer for me, and there's so many variables. Are they young? Are they old? Are they mature? Are they not? I've had just a few teams that really just allowed me to manage the game. And what I mean by that is, I've had more teams than not that, you're still worried about some individual mechanics or fundamentals. You're still worried about some team defense or team offense. But those teams that allowed me to manage, when you can, okay, that inning's okay. We're going to be okay here. Now I'm going to start looking at the fifth and who we're going to bring in and who they're bringing to the plate. And, it's not USC or it's not the Dodgers, but
Right.
There is some of that thought process even at the high school level. And you're so fortunate when you have a team that will allow you to do that. When we're struggling, a lot of times we go away from things. I had a shortstop, 12 or 13, really struggled with the pop-up. I mean, he was really good with a routine ground ball and kind of moving guys around and some of the things we expect our shortstops to do, but really struggled with the pop-up. So, opposing team hits one day and ball goes up and he doesn't look comfortable underneath it and he drops it. And I immediately go to my coaches and say, shut up. Don't say a word about it. Leave it alone. Don't say one word about it. Don't coach him up. Leave it alone. We did. He got through it. I don't know if he was ever great at it. A lot of times too, and I see this, not just in town, or I see it a lot of places, but we'd give guys a day off. Like, I've never been a 4-hour practice guy. I've always been 2 hours or less, and let's get out of there. Now, that being said, and I think we might get into it in a little bit, we practiced with some tempo, and our occupational
Right.
tempo was quick and it moved. And I take a lot of pride when we'd have people come and watch our practices go, man, you guys can get a lot done in an hour and 45. And I'm
Right.
wondering why other people can't. I do know this, this is what I believe. Anything after 2 hours, they're not paying attention anyway. They're not mature enough to do it. They're just not there yet. They're playing baseball. They're not working baseball like you may at the collegiate level, even the junior college level. That turns into work. So how those guys and gals at the junior college and college level handle it, that's how they handle it. But for us, we'd have scheduled days off, and I'd look at our schedule, and I knew our schedule almost by heart, 6 months before the season would ever start. And I'd kind of tell myself, okay, that's a pretty good day to give them a day off.
Right.
And, so I don't know if it works, but it worked for us.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's something you developed as a coach, right? Something you picked up along the way, or is that something you kind of did right at the very beginning?
Absolutely not, dude. I was learning until the day I stopped coaching.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I just don't, it was never in my DNA to say, okay, I've got this figured out.
Right.
Never, ever. There was always something, our offensive stuff, as the years went on, my clubs were kind of known for hitting and running, moving guys over, false starts, bunting behind them, first and thirds, and doing some things. And I would tell the kids every year, I tell the players every year, like, if you guys are going to hit a bunch of doubles and you guys are going to hit all year long, we'll never do this. Right. But we're going to have this because I know at least for a 2-week stretch, you're not going to hit. So we didn't want to just not have anything to go to. We wanted something to go to, and it worked. And we tried to take advantage of corner infielders or bad rotations. And man, I tell you, when I had the teams to do it, when we smelt blood, we went for it. We didn't stop. I mean, and that stuff kind of started to happen at Porterville High, talking about what do you know when you're young and what do you know when you're older. I wish I had some of those teams at Granite Hills back, because some of that stuff would have really played. Sure. There's one of my all-time best friends in coaching, Mark Gentry, who did a wonderful job at Delano High, and our careers kind of started on the same path because he had a program that sort of had the same skill set that I had. And, we weren't afraid to squeeze 2 times in a row, and I joke with him even now. I see him once every couple years, but we did that in 11 or 13 or whatever it was. And so, yeah, you definitely mature and get better as a coach as years go on, in every facet of your program. Sure. We're just talking about the stuff on the field. I mean, what I know now compared to 23, it's not even close. The 44-year-old playing the 23-year-old me or coaching against the 23-year-old me, it wouldn't even be close.
You wipe the mop out.
It wouldn't even be close.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what a good coach does, right? They never stop learning. They never stop developing and trying to just become a better coach and run more successful programs.
Well, and I've watched your guys' podcast. You guys do a really good job, and some of the guests that you guys have had are wonderful, wonderful people and mean a lot to this community. And you never stop, and the word success comes up a lot in your guys' podcast.
Right.
And for me, I at some point in my career, I stopped thinking of it as a category, and I started thinking more of it as a pursuit. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that you guys have watched The Last Dance 100 times like I have. Yep. But I think I thought this for a long time, but didn't have the intelligence or the maturity to put it in the words of Phil Jackson. But you're really only successful in that moment.
Sure.
And those mutant competitors, it's almost not gratifying because you put in all this time and effort and you finally get there and you get to that point. And then if you're truly a competitor, what's next?
Right.
Yeah.
Almost momentarily.
Yep.
And that can play mind games on a competitive person too. Like, well, what are you doing this for? When's it going to feel final? It never really does.
Yeah.
It never really does.
Nick Saban talks about it all the time, and you see him, he's almost motionless after most games. Even after winning SEC title yesterday, like the guy is just like, pretty stone-faced. And you could just see him, and by knowing his style, he's thinking so far ahead, and they're already on the recruiting trail for next year. And the season isn't even over yet.
Never ends.
And so that's the mentality it takes, and that's why you see successful programs like Alabama or whatever it is.
Absolutely. I mean, those guys and gals, they never stop thinking about what's next. And you hope that when they get to the end of their career, then they can enjoy it.
Sure, yeah.
Right. Edges off, all that stuff. But it's a thankless career sometimes.
Those wins, I mean, like you said, they're temporary. That feeling that you get once it's all said and done, and that accomplishment is yours. It's temporary. That feeling, it's gone. 100%. You're going to go get it again.
And, you talk about the SEC and you talk about, in major college athletics, winning is winning. Mm-hmm. And games are precious. As a high school baseball coach, you only get 28, sometimes 29, and then there could be some playoffs and stuff like that. But those are celebrations of your program. Every time you play, I feel as though that should be a celebration of your program. It's not a sing along; it's a concert. You are unapologetic. You are trying to prepare your team the best that you can. You take the field, you play for 7 innings, and, then you move to the next day's practice. And so it kind of, in some ways, it becomes this fog of a season. But you just keep moving through it, cautiously or sometimes above the speed limit or whatever.
Yeah.
But you keep moving through it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and you almost enjoy and this is going to sound cliche because a lot of people talk about it, but you almost enjoy the process. And sometimes when you are struggling, like how to figure it out, then actually when you reach that win or that championship.
And going back to what you know at 23 and what you know as you get older and things like that, you really dive into the relationship with the players, and you start looking at them differently. They're not a guy that's going to get hits for you. It's a guy that may not have had a very good day today, and I need to cushion that with baseball and practice or whatever. But you start to identify, okay, I don't need some thump in the 4-hole. I need a guy that I can depend on. Well, he's got a skill set because they have to have that.
Sure.
He's got a skill set, but he's also dependable. He might work there. And so now you're getting a little bit more detailed in how you build, just to line up on that day. We're not talking about the other 22 hours a day, so it's just a never ending process. You have to love it. As a player, as a coach, you have to love that, or it will consume you.
Yeah, no, that's a fair thing to say for sure. So, let's talk about who you were before the coaching.
Okay.
You know what I mean? As a player, tell us briefly about your come up, when you first picked up the baseball, high school, college, and then we'll pick this back up into the coaching thing, but let everybody know who you were as a baseball guy.
So average at best. Average at best. And, growing up, I was a 1-2, 7, 8, 9 hitter. Really, really enjoyed basketball, enjoyed hitting and football and the competitive side and the teammate side of football. I miss this a lot in high school. The 15 minutes that you're getting dressed before you take the field, that's like some sort of mythical land that people don't get unless they're in it. And I played on arguably one of the worst teams at Porterville High my senior year. We went 1-9. We beat a really bad Tulare Western team. They were nothing like they are now. But that, looking back, that part didn't matter. Getting dressed next to Kevin and some of my teammates and things like that, and guys I still hang out with today, when you're not prompted, it's not a coach coming in saying, shut up, listen, pay attention, get focused. You're just there in the moment, and you're watching guys and you're paying attention. You see something different with them. Man, it's a good feeling, you know, and I was different. I'm sure that I said, I want to play in the big leagues like every 7-year-old does. From early on, man, I knew I wanted to teach and coach. I was very, very different that way, to a point where when we could watch a basketball game on CBS, ABC, NBC, whatever, I would watch coaches. I would watch their sideline demeanor and how they would react to a call or how they would react to a player that must have made a mistake.
Sure.
And then you just start pulling things, and I didn't even know I was doing it. But you see those things.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And they meant a lot to me. And so you just start adding it to your toolkit, you know, and then one day you get there and you're just doing it. You know, you're just coaching. I don't even really know why I wanted to teach and coach. My father was a good he left a real big impression on me and my sisters and my mom, and had a very, very good upbringing. By no means were we silver spoon people, but I always had plenty to eat, nice clothes and things like that. And he was an educator. So there's probably some natural gravity towards that. But I just wanted to be a part of it. You know, I always thought that I was a decent teammate, and you know, I think that guys could depend on me, and that's a good feeling. You know, it's a good, wholesome, moral feeling. You know? But yeah, I mean, as far as player, just average. Went to Porterville College, went to a small college in Iowa, and that was it for me.
What position?
So in high school, and I think we'll get into this too, in high school I was a catcher. And I was probably better than average defensively. I could throw and I could block and I could call a game. Senior year in football, I had a knee surgery. So even for me, who was a very average player, the game changed drastically. I went from somebody that was pretty quick to a guy that wasn't quick anymore, and actually had to take a red shirt at Porterville College. And thankfully, the coach at the time, my senior year at Porterville College, took another job or went on to do something else. We had another coach come in. We were not very good, and thankfully for me, that probably allowed me to make the team. I had a good freshman year for me, hit north of 300, whatever. Again, I was 1, 2, 7, 8, 9. That was a pretty offensive club. We didn't pitch very well. And then a guy from Iowa came in as an assistant coach, and he was there my second semester of my freshman year, of my redshirt year. And then he was there for my first semester of the year I played at Porterville College. And for whatever reason, whether it was my work ethic or whatever, he kind of took me under his wing and taught me how to hit. And it was enough to kind of give me a decent year. In winter break, so we're in the first semester fall of my second year at Porterville College. Winter break, he goes back to Iowa for Christmas with his family and gets a job at a very small college in Dubuque, Iowa. So I play my spring semester, and he calls and recruits me and whatever, and it just worked out fine.
Yeah.
So I went back there and played and had a wonderful time, had a wonderful experience in college.
That's good.
Yep.
Yeah.
In Iowa.
In Iowa, yep.
Still have contact with him?
Yeah. Yep.
That's awesome.
I don't talk to him every day, but yeah, we still have each other's phone numbers in our phones, things like that.
So speaking of coaches, who were some of the coaches that had a huge impression on you, that inspired you to not only get into coaching, but just kind of, like, that's my guy, like that. He really had a huge impact on you.
Well, I think looking back, as a parent now, we are so fortunate if our kids at a young age can have a fundamental coach and a coach that really knows what they're talking about. Because a lot of times it's, somebody gets asked to coach or forced to coach or whatever. I had a high school basketball coach that, and again, this is me knowing I wanted to teach and coach from a young age, that his tempo to basketball and practice was quick. And he always had a practice plan. And, the practice plan wasn't posted, but as you played in the program, you knew what was coming next. And I can clearly remember as a sophomore in high school on a varsity basketball team thinking to myself, okay, when I'm coaching someday, this is what I'm going to do, but I'm also going to post a practice plan. And then as I got through college and really wanted to make a run at this thing, I wanted our baseball practices to be ran like a basketball practice. I wanted them to be tempoed, and I wanted the transitions to be quick, and I didn't want to waste any time at all. We didn't have water breaks, but the kids knew they could get water whenever they wanted to. Like, just little simple things like that led to me or that style of a practice plan, know? And all of my players, not all of them, most of them that come back, they are very complimentary of the way we practiced. And then as now you fast forward a couple of years ago, I'm reading a book, and I think it's, I don't even know if it's a book or some sort of coaching magazine or whatever, but Schlossnagle, who is at TCU, who's now at Texas Tech, he's quoted as saying, I want our practices and our offense to be like a fast break basketball team. So it all just kind of started to make sense to me, even just a few years ago, So he was very impactful on the structure of my practices.
Right.
I had a high school baseball coach that brought in some humor into how he worked with us. And he wasn't a funny guy. He was a business guy, but he was very good at, this is what I need corrected, followed with some sort of comment that would get you on his side. And then he'd finish it with, I need this done soon, type thing. So all of those little things came into play, and I wasn't going home and writing those down every night, but For one reason or another, I have a memory for some of those things. And then as you move on, I can remember clearly thinking to myself, I'm not going to handle that situation that way when I coach. Hey, he handled that pretty good. I'm going to, without ever showing up and coach. I never in my life would I do that, ever.
Go ahead.
That's interesting because I remember reading a book. I don't remember which one, but John Wooden back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, he was noted for, and he would put on clinics about practice and practice plans and then how they practice. Every minute of that practice was accounted for.
Yeah.
And he would have it on, little 3x5 note cards and same thing. And that impacted a lot of coaches. And now it's one of those things a lot of programs, whether it's baseball, soccer programs, basketball programs do. And I remember even when I played high school football, Chris likewise was very much like that. When I coached with him and when I played for him, every 5 minutes was broken down, water break, different drills. So everything was accounted for. So you were intentional about your practice. You weren't wasting any time and it was efficient.
Yeah. And when you talk about, and I don't know if I want to jump to the script, but you talk about successful coaches. I've always thought they're prepared, they're organized, strict, fair, discipline, and very time efficient. I think those four things are a quality, whether you're coaching water polo or basketball or lacrosse or tennis. I think those successful people have those things to a point with our preparation. I was coaching freshman basketball for Rich Rankin when he was at Granite Hills, and he kind of surprises the coaching staff with, we're going to go up to Hoover High School and we're going to go to a coaching clinic. And I thought it was the raddest thing in the world. I was like, sweet, do I have to pay? And so we're going to Hoover and my expectations are, okay, great. We're going to get a junior college basketball coach. We're going to get, a successful, city school coach from the Fresno area. Well, it ends up being John Montgomery, who at the time was at Stanford, and he was getting to the Sweet 16, ended up coaching with the Golden State Warriors, stuff like that. And he comes down and he pulls out an old projector and he just starts talking about how he planned his year out. And he said that at some point in his career, he would write down everything he knew about basketball, everything. And, he didn't have the time to go into the details of that, but he did say, as my years go on, that one page turned into 2 and next year it turned into 4, whatever. Right. So when you first start coaching, it's about a page. And then by the end of it, it's too much,
Right.
So I went home and started thinking about some baseball stuff. And, you write down everything you have, and then you take 2 or 3 things that are closely related, a long alignment, a short alignment. Hey, that's a pretty good day. We can talk about both on the same day. And then you start to find some drills that accomplish both of those. And then you put it on a calendar. And I can't say that I did that like my last 3 or 4 years because it was kind of there. I already had it for me. But that's what we did. And I would take my practice plans home. And the one I had in my back pocket, and I would write, I don't like this, or this was too long, or so-and-so didn't do that. This needs to be corrected. I'd put it in a binder. At the end of the year, it would be labeled 02 or 03 or 04 or whatever. And for a long, long time, I had, from the time I started coaching to maybe my 10th, 11th, 12th year. And the crazy thing about it, right, without really going back to them, if you looked at them, we were doing the same thing on about the same day annually. Yeah. So I would, that was a neat thing for me.
Absolutely.
Cool. We were organized enough, and the pacing of it, and a high school baseball calendar. That was pretty neat.
That's high level, man.
It is. Okay, I was lucky enough to witness this, because I briefly was out there with you in 2017, I think. Uh-huh. And, I remember I'm kid you not, I remember the first day I was at a practice, right? You give me a paper. I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like, because by then I think I was like, maybe practice already started, I'm kind of new. You already had your coaches and stuff like this. And now I'm like, okay, this is different. And I'm looking at it, I'm seeing 415 to 435, 435 to 555. And then this one's like 5. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And by the time I figured it out, it's your practice sheet and all this type of stuff, because I've never seen something like this. And I didn't coach that day. all I did was just observe because I was in complete awe of how structured this practice was. It was so gosh damn time efficient. There wasn't a kid that had an opportunity or a chance to do something that they weren't supposed to be doing. It was bang, bang, bang. All right, practice is over. See you guys tomorrow.
Yep.
Oh, well, all right. Well, cool. So, you know, and I took that over to my training.
Mm-hmm.
And I kid you not, you know, because by then I was in my 6th year of being a personal trainer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm still learning just as much as the next guy. You know what I mean? And after that first day, I'm like, man, you know, because I only get an hour with the client.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take this over. I'm going to just do the same exact thing into my training. And sure as shit, it worked. And it was perfect. And every single client thanks me for it.
Well, good.
It doesn't give them a chance. So I want to personally thank you for sharing what you took to the baseball program with me, because it skyrocketed my training, man.
Of course.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
Glad to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so going kind of back into, I guess, coaching a little bit, what is like, especially now you were a director of athletics at Monache. Now you're overseeing the entire school district.
Yeah.
And then you get to see lots of different coaches and hire coaches and kind of what you're looking for, leadership style, like whether when you're looking to hire a coach, or maybe it's just your own personal kind of like leadership style. And it's not necessarily just, you know, the X's and O's, but how you run a program, how you're leading, you know, kids, how you're leading your own coaching staff. Everyone kind of has that mission statement, how they're gonna lead. What is that for you, and kind of what do you look for when you're trying to hire coaches?
Well, I think a couple things. You know, even when I first started coaching, you know, I may have thought coaching was very A to B to C to D, and it's not. It is not mathematical. It's very artistic. So, you know, saying this is what I'm looking for, or that's what we need, it changes.
Sure.
It's just different. You're not coaching the same thing. You're not doing the same thing. What I loosely say, and it's hard for me to explain it, I'm looking for someone that I feel as though in a 15-minute interview, right?
Sure.
That is going to be out in front of their program. And without saying it, in my mind, this slow little hamster wheel, the expectation is that they are going to have passion for their program, and they're going to know it inside and out. And maybe not day one, but as they go, part of the passion is learning from their mistakes, understanding what worked, understanding what didn't, and I'm going to delete that. I'm going to add this. So that takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes grace. But, you know, I believe that coaching is such a platform or an avenue to impact, because you're going to impact your kids, whether it's positive or negative. You are going to make an impact.
Yeah.
It is so dear to my heart that my expectations are for them to do sort of what we did.
Right.
You know, and sometimes that's not reasonable either. So you've got to step back, and you've got to understand that, you know, sometimes they're looking for a suggestion or looking for a different way to do things. One thing that is difficult in this position, and I'm trying to figure out ways to insert myself, is that you know, you get off of campus life and you're much more behind the scenes,
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to let people work, and you want to let them you know, develop and make mistakes and get better from them and grow from them. You don't have a lot of interaction with your coaches. You have a lot of interaction with your on-site athletic directors.
Sure.
And you hope that they can move some of their own philosophies and their ideas into their people. It's one thing I'd like to solve. I would like to, you know, have a summit. I think that we have some outstanding coaches in this district. I don't think that they need to go to Hoover High School. I think that they could go to a Porterville High gym and listen to our own interior coaches and listen to strength and fitness coaches like we have in this community, to learn and grow. And ultimately, that's only going to impact our kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In our community, right? It's a big deal. It's a big deal to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure. You know, a long coaching career, you know, I'm sure you've had a lot of people giving you some positive feedback and negative feedback.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the negative feedback. How did you, take that on? How did you possibly overcome it? You know what I mean? When you heard something you quite didn't ask for, did not want to hear, but everybody has an opinion, right?
Well, yeah, you can't take it personal, you know, and I used to. When I was a younger guy, I wasn't mature enough. You know, you used to take it personal and you used to go to sleep thinking about whatever. You can't take it personal. Sometimes it's the truth. If it's the truth, you got to fix some things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes it isn't. And you just stay true to yourself and you keep moving forward. I have a guy over in Visalia, Jody Allen, who's kind of been my go-to over the years for many different things. And he actually doesn't like my practice plans. He says, well, what if your coaches are still coaching while you're doing your 15 minutes or whatever? And my rebuttal to that is I have an idea of about how long it's going to take. And I also don't think that we should ever do anything for more than 10, 12 minutes. Because I think they need something new, or something else.
Right.
But you take it and, you don't take it with a grain of salt. You learn from it and you move on. Like no one's spotless. No one's flawless. And if you sit on somebody long enough, I don't care how good they are. If you sit on a coach long enough, you're going to find something you don't like about them.
Yeah.
And that's wrong.
Yeah.
An athletic director, if you're directing athletics, you shouldn't do that. Let them coach. Let them be who they are. And if you have a correction for them and a reasonable expectation, then you better have the courage to have that difficult conversation with them.
Sure.
And if they don't change it, now we have a different set of problems.
Sure.
Right. But, I don't get into the weeds and all that stuff. And, our basketball coaches, I would never, ever go to them and say, well, why are you pressing? Why are you doing? That's their thing. It's not who I am. It's not in my DNA for that type of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. We kind of talked about practice plans and a couple things. I think the biggest thing, and it does get tricky with the CIF, and then even like you go to college at NCAA, like how you could practice off-season stuff. But a lot of programs are built in the off-season, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they're successful. So when you, as a coach or as an athletic director, what does a successful off-season program look like? And I mean, I know it looks different for each different sport, but what does a successful program need to do in the off-season to be successful and continue growing? Because each year is different, personnel is different, right? You got different teams coming up, different players coming through in your league.
Yeah, so I guess I have two different viewpoints on that. As an administrator, you want to offer them something to do in the off-season. And it's really that simple. You want some sort of structure. It doesn't have to be nearly as detailed as your season of sport, but you do want them to have an opportunity to go somewhere and get better. When I first started coaching, we were gaining an edge, or trying to. When I was at Granite Hills, not everybody was doing a fall program. Not everybody was doing a summer program. As the coaching went on, now you're just trying to keep up because everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
I was always very much, I wanted to see my younger guys in the fall. I wanted to see my younger guys in the summer. Now, that's not to mean that our older guys weren't expected to be there if they weren't doing anything. But I'll go back to Angel Flores. He has an opportunity to play with the Marlin scout team in the fall or summer. I can't remember what it was. It was awesome for me because I trusted the kid. He trusted me. I wanted him to go and play better competition. But then it gave me an opportunity to see some sophomores and freshmen that I'm not going to see again, because in baseball, you practice at the same time.
Yeah.
Basketball, and you play at the same time. In basketball, a basketball coach can watch their freshman team. Now, they've got to prep their varsity team during the JV game, but they get a chance to see them. In baseball, you don't. So, and then the other side of that too is when we would have guys go and play for someone else, right? A lot of coaches, they're almost scared of that because, well, what if they learn something? I didn't care about that. I wanted them to.
Yeah.
And as time went on, becoming a better coach, they'd come back and go, we're already kind of doing that stuff. Now they're surrounded, right, by better players. You're talking about a Marlin scout team, and that's a huge benefit, right? I know you have a son. You don't have any children?
No.
When they get older, when you do, if they're athletic minded, there is something, again, mythical, magical, when you're surrounded by better players than you, something happens to you.
Yeah.
And you have to get better.
Right.
You just, I guess have to get better might not even be the right way to describe it. You just get better, and you don't know, you don't really know how or why. And
you adapt. Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
And this mutation happens and you just get better. But, we wanted our guys to play. We wanted them to play as much as they did or as much as they could. And when I was younger, mandatory. As time went on, like, if you need some time off, take some time off. It's no big deal. Like, but when I get you January 1, you better be ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
You better be ready to go. That was a big deal for us. And all of my players accepted that pretty well.
Worked out pretty
good.
Well.
Yep.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? Because, we always talk about there's always that debate between, we do see a lot of, especially in baseball, like wrestling, a lot of specialization going on there, right? Versus the 3-sport athlete that's constantly playing. But nowadays, those seasons are overlapping, right? Baseball, you're playing fall ball, you got football going on, then basketball, wrestling, track, all that stuff, right? But for those kids that are maybe basketball players, a football player and a baseball player, how do you manage that overlapping and kind of still encouraging them to be those multi-sport athletes to get the best, to become the best athlete they could become?
For me personally, I never mind. I cared, but I didn't care if they wanted to go and play something else. I cared if they were going out on a date and said I can't be at practice. I cared if they were going to go to the movies and I can't be at practice.
Right.
If a kid wanted to go to basketball practice, I didn't take it personal.
Right.
As long as they were ready to go January 1.
Yeah.
Right.
For me, now obviously if they're playing basketball, you don't get them until, your season of sports starts, but it's just, high school is 4 years you never get back. You want, as an educator, you want them to be involved.
Yeah.
You want them to do as much as they can handle. Some kids can't handle so much, but you want them to be involved. And I feel like I did do a nice job of this. I was always an educator first, just like a kid should always be a student first. So there was this perspective and understanding, but again, as long as they were ready to go in January.
Yeah. And they communicate, right? So I think that's a big thing, just communicating.
Well, as a coach too, you got to have that. You got to make them feel safe about that,
And we would say this. Listen, fellas, I don't need you to communicate like the president, but I do need you to communicate like a young adult.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. In our day and age, the communication is so easy. There's so many different platforms. You can't tell me that you couldn't fire off a text or even let one of your teammates know or something like that. But we did expect them to communicate like young adults.
Right. Yeah, it's not hard.
Nope, it's not.
So we sit here and you see words on the wall, success, hustle, persistence, determination, and stuff like that. Things that are all required, for people that come in here to have a successful lifestyle.
Yeah.
What are some traits for a coach to have a successful career that you would say in a few chosen words? Well,
I think all this stuff is wonderful and it's motivational and it's great. But if you're not going to live it, dude, the kids are going to see, they're going to see right through
They spot fake.
They're like detectives. If you're not going to live it, if it's not going to be who you are, then either don't talk about it, right? Or don't expect it. But it's got to be a part of you, And I think that's what sort of blends those high skill set teams and a quality coach is that he's not talking about it. She's not talking about it. They're actually doing it, watching people spend time on a field or understanding that, they don't always get it right away, but a basketball coach, highly prepared basketball coach, they're spending a lot of time off the court looking at film. A football coach, I've seen it in my own eyes when I was on campus in Wenatchee. Those guys are meeting on Sundays for hours at a time. And the tricky part is sometimes, you didn't have the skill set to execute on Friday night, but they were right back in there the next Sunday. So it becomes infectious, I guess, from one to the other. Sometimes it's team to coach, and a lot of times it's coach to team. But all those things are great. They're highly motivational. But if you're not getting that as a player. If you're not getting that from your leader, they're going to see right through that.
Forget about it.
Yep, every time.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of going back, successful coach. We've talked a little bit about like practice plans and running successful off-season programs, but building a program, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's a couple things from a coaching standpoint you would kind of recommend, what are those traits of a successful program from the eye test? Like you're looking at whatever it is, Menachie, Tulare, what you look at a program and you know, like, okay, they're doing this, this, and this. They're going to be successful.
So a lot of patience. If you're established, a lot of patience. It goes back to maybe my time at Menachie as a baseball coach. Somewhat established as a baseball coach, at least in the county.
Mm-hmm.
We had to have some patience. The stuff that we were doing, I knew would work. You just had to have some patience. And, the word of mouth thing for me is better than any type of marketing scheme or advertising. Like it'll get around, this is what's going on over there. They're relentless in their approach. They never stop coaching. When practice is over, they are on to something else. You got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
As a coach, because it can be very consuming and you have to have your family time. You have to have that decompression time. But it's a relentless approach to growing your program. So I don't know if there's one thing that you have to have or two things that you have to have, but it has to be a part of you. It has to be who you are. And I think sometimes there are, listen, fellas, there's hundreds of coaches that know more about baseball than I do. I mean, thousands. But when you have that coach that has the skill set to understand a long alignment, short alignment, a coverage, whatever, but they're not passionate about it. They're not believing in their program. They're not diving into every corner of it, every corner of a circle, right?
Yep.
You players see through it.
Yeah,
they'll see through it every time, man.
Yep.
And once they do, God, that's hard to get back. It's hard to get that respect back. It's hard to get that trust back. You know, it is.
When you say something,
yeah, I was gonna say like on the other end of that. You on the kind of director side of it, you obviously oversee a lot of programs now, and you see other districts as well. Programs. What's something that kills programs? Like actually like teams that why they weren't successful. That's kind of a commonality in sports.
Well, I mentioned it earlier. I've always thought that highly successful people or highly successful coaches or whatever, CEOs, superintendents, they're organized, they're prepared, strict, fair, disciplined, time efficient. If there's cracks in those, you're going to lose a little bit of your program. If you're not organized, well, what do you guys want to do today? That kids don't want to be there. Athletes don't want to be there for a sing-along. They want to be there for the concert. They want to get better.
They want to be coached.
They don't know how to get better. It's your job to make them better. Sometimes you've got to be aggressive with your team and your voice and some of those details. And sometimes you got to step back and kind of let them do. But if you get away from those four things as a trainer, as an educator in the classroom, like we can have these boxed, ways to teach a kid how to write a paragraph. And they're wonderful and they're great and they work. And we can have these boxed math concepts and stuff like that. But as a teacher, whatever you're doing, if you get away from one of those four things, you're going to have a tough time.
Right.
You're going to, and even the discipline thing, discipline isn't you got in trouble. Discipline is being on time.
Right. Discipline
is knowing your signs. Taking a pitch when you should, when you don't want to, staying disciplined. On the strict side of things, like when I first started coaching, we had this laundry list of rules, right? Shoes need to be clean. They didn't need to be polished, but they need to be cleaned. You need to wear your hat a certain way. You need to wear your belt a certain way. And if they cross that line with me, then I had a reaction. Well, as my time went on, my line moved, right? Because that stuff, it wasn't important. It wasn't it wasn't important enough to take away from our time together practicing.
Sure.
Right. But the one thing that didn't change is when you cross that line, my reaction was the same, so, and then, and nothing I really do is original.
Right.
Everything I kind of have done, I feel like is poached. My laundry list of rules turned into Pete Carroll's, always protect the team. And what a wonderful rule that is. It's vague enough that it gives the coach all the leverage. But it's still clear enough that, we all get to kind of define it. When I say we all, the team does. If you're not going to class, you're not protecting the team.
Yeah.
If you're late to class, you're not protecting the team, because that could lead to something where you're not playing that day. And, I think sometimes too, when people talk about discipline and strict but fair discipline, it comes with this, well, I've got to be loud and I've got to be aggressive. No, you don't. Yeah. We had a kid in 19. Western's coming to town. They're coming to our place. No, it wasn't 19. It was 22. It was just a couple years ago. Western's coming to our place. It's a Wednesday. We're out of school at 1:45 or 1:55 or whatever it is. Kids have to be back to campus or spikes on by 3 if we're starting at 4, or 3:30 if we're starting at 4:30. He's a couple minutes late. I didn't get mad at all. I just went and rewrote the lineup and got it back from Kenny and gave him a new one. And we won the game. So, it worked. Yeah. Now, after that, that's over. Punishment's over. Right back. And he hit 6 for us on a team that could hit. Yeah. He was a good player. On a lot of my teams, he would have been a 4-hitter or 3-hitter.
Sure.
But, that stuff starts to happen. Yeah. You win the game. Right. That proved your point. Yeah. And then he didn't get to be a part of it. And to his credit, he was a great teammate that day and hat in hand the next day, and it was over. We moved on. He went right back into the lineup.
Teachable moments.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, but sometimes it doesn't lead to that, You might ruffle some feathers, maybe not just with the player, but with the parent. Sure. So I'm sure, you're not an ice cream man. You're not going to please everybody. You're a coach that's making hard decisions. So I'm sure you might have had an encounter at once, maybe twice throughout your career with a concerned parent about their playing time. Now looking back at it, giving advice to a current coach or somebody who's looking to become a coach, what advice would you give them, when they run into that?
The stuff I see most of the time is that you have handled situation A a particular way. Situation B is very close to situation A, and you handled situation B differently. Now a parent has the right to be upset and to question. You are going to have a handful of parents that they're not reasonable. They don't understand. They don't get it. So you stay true to yourself and you just keep going. And that doesn't mean that, you lose sleep over it. I did. Sure. I'm not going to be that guy. Well, I'm not going to lose sleep over that because I did. But you stay true to yourself and you keep moving. Yeah. You keep moving forward and you know that, and back to the parent that is reasonable. Sometimes they just don't know. Literally, sometimes they just don't know. I saw this a lot with freshmen and sophomores, either from an administrative standpoint or from my own program. We'd get a few games into the end of the year and he hasn't played, and mom or dad would wonder why he's not playing. And I'd say, well, they need to work on these things, because I tried not to talk about playing time. I tried to talk about what would help them get some or improve upon their game. But they'll look at you and go, well, when he played last year, he was guaranteed a quarter. Well, I'm sorry, Mrs. So-and-so, that's not the way high school athletics work. Oh, okay. And they just move on. Sometimes they just don't know, Yeah. So you have to have the courage to have that uncomfortable conversation. And as long as they're, as long as they're okay with it, they're not harassing you right after a game or whatever, then you owe them that a little bit. You owe them some communication.
They are part of the program. They are.
They're a huge part of the program. Yep. And for a long time, I made that mistake. Whitney got me to buy into this, that listen, if you really want your programs to take off, you're going to have to accept some of their help, because as a mistake a mistake, I don't need their help. Yeah, you do. You need their help. Yep. You need them. You do. Now you don't need their help on the field, but you need their help. Yeah. And I was pretty fortunate. I had a lot of parents that kind of understood how the process worked. When I was at Porterville High, and I had rosters from 11 to 15. pretty good rosters. And we had it kind of set up where, sophomores, juniors, you sort of had to wait your turn. And credit to the seniors that were playing in front of them. They didn't let those guys have their job.
Right.
And then that turned into its own little monster because the next guy would take over the next year and he wouldn't let the next sophomore or freshman have his job. I'll never forget in 15, that team I talked about, we got walked off in the Valley semifinal at Ridgeview. We get beat 1-0. Andrew Witten, who I mentioned earlier, he's pitching a wonderful game. He's making big pitches in big situations. We're making critical plays that a lot of high school teams don't make, or my high school teams didn't make, and they're making the play in that game. We get walked off. It's 0-2 to their 9-hitter, ball 1, ball 2, ball 3, 3-2 pitch. Kid flares a ball over our first baseman. Previous to that, a kid had gotten on. It's tied 0-0. They're the home team. We have 2 strikes on the 8-hitter. He singles or he gets on or something. He's still second. The throw from the catcher is short. We don't knock it down. He goes over to third. 2 outs, runner at third. 2 strikes on the hitter. We're a strike away from getting in the next inning. Little flare beats us over a 6-2. First baseman, a guy named Dylan Peavy. Law enforcement now is as a wedding. That's a kind of a cool thing too, to see one of your former players get married. But he's a kid that didn't play for us a whole lot as a junior. His senior year, he leads us in home runs.
Wow.
But that's a lot of credit to him. And we were playing the right guys in his junior year. We had a successful team that year. Mm-hmm. And so, he probably didn't like it in his junior year, but I'm hoping now that he's whatever he is, 28 or something, I'm hoping he's going, oh, that's why. That makes sense now. Yeah. And not because of this podcast that he may or may not watch, but because it's organic and he just sort of understands it. Yeah.
This isn't a question that was on, but I feel like it's an important question, because you had a few lineups where you had a guy that was behind the starting shortstop that could play, but it just necessarily wasn't his time.
Yeah.
I think one of the greatest challenges in our community is sometimes the roster's short. Mm-hmm. Right. Usually when you get your starting 9, those are your dogs. Yeah. You know what I mean? And specifically to help out the player, when they don't have that competition behind them to continually get better, mm-hmm. How do you keep those kids intact? It's a long season sometimes, especially if it's not a winning season. You know what I mean? And they're like, man, you know what? Whatever. I ain't going to show up to practice. He ain't going to start that guy. He's half of what I am. What do you tell those type of kids, or how do you approach them? To get all of them, all 26, 27, 28, 29 games.
Have the courage to start the other guy. Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's some great coaching style or some great coaching philosophy. I know for me, I was stupid enough to sacrifice a win to set the tone with some of that stuff. Mm. You only have to do it once. Sometimes it doesn't work, but in that situation, I'm not, because I've had that before. I'm not going to go practice. He's not going to play him. Don't play him. Don't. And you may sacrifice a win, or you may sacrifice a better team on that day, but you're going to get a better team the next day.
Facts. Yeah.
It's really, and again, I wouldn't have done that at 22. Mm. I wouldn't have done that at 22. I'd figure it takes you time to figure it out. You know.
That's big time, yeah. And like the good coaches do that, right? Whether it's Kim Mulkey at LSU right now, and then, Gino talks about it all the time with UConn. Sometimes you sit that All-American if they're not doing the right things, they're not being responsible and taking care of business.
When you talk about those great coaches, if you delete the resources that the SEC has and the financial backing that they have and the animal that major collegiate sports are, when you get down to the bare roots, a good high school coach, a good little league coach, a good collegiate coach, a good professional coach, they're going to have something that sort of unites them. And it's usually in their philosophy. Yeah, and it's usually in the simplest of things.
Yep.
They don't get lost in uniforms. They don't get lost in this. They don't get lost in that. They get lost in the bones that are creating your home.
Yep.
And when you dive into the coaching thing like some of us have, you better have control of your house. Mm-hmm. Have control of that.
That's such an underrated word. Just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Just keep it simple. Between being simple and being consistent, that's it.
Some of my biggest mistakes, I tried to get fancy.
Yeah.
Keep it very
It
simple.
happens all the time in the damn gym.
All the time.
People get, that is social media has just ruined a good, honest fitness trainer.
There's just no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts to being a player. And if they are, they're fraudulent. They're fake.
Yeah.
You believe there is because the talent that you're playing with isn't very good or playing against. There are no shortcuts whatsoever in the coaching game, in the playing game. They're not. You have to put in work.
Yep. You can't replace reps.
You cannot. You cannot. Nope.
In today's world, things like Zach kind of mentioned it with social media. From your perspective now, directing athletics, what are the biggest challenges of both the youth and high school athletics in 2023? What are those challenges that we're kind of facing? Are they the same? Have they changed?
I don't want to be thought of as, well, back in my day,
No, 100% right.
I think that there has always been distractions. I think that there has, and now whether it's this or that or whatever, I think there's always been challenges, distractions. I think sometimes from whatever side you're on, sometimes you want them because it helps you excel. I learned this from a high school basketball coach. He's telling me a story about one of the teams he had coached. And a pretty good player came into his office and said, "Hey, listen, I don't think I'm going to play this year." And he looked him straight in the face and said, "Some of your teammates are going to be happy and some of your teammates are going to be disappointed. And the teammates that are going to be happy was probably the kid that was going to play behind him." So, you try to manage the distractions and things like that. And you say things like, "Listen, when you are at practice, when you're at the game, I need your full conviction." The other time you can go, talking about my line and some of my rules. When I first started at Granite Hills, you couldn't be on your phone on a bus. Why would I care about that? Why would I care if they're on their phone? As long as they're ready to play. Now, can you have the phone in the dugout? Absolutely not.
Right. Time and place.
As long as they're ready to play, why do I care if they're on their phone? And I may be foolish to think this, but nowadays, think of the stinking homework done on their phone. Why would I care if they're on their phone?
Right.
As long as they're ready to play.
Yeah. I have this thing with, people of leaders and instructors and this, they always demand eye contact.
Sure.
Sometimes kids don't listen, better with eye contact.
Sure.
I'm not going to beat the kid up because he's not looking at me. Maybe he could hear me a little bit better because he's not looking at me. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to lose him, and make the situation directly about him or her because he's not making eye contact about, with what I'm talking about. There's just simple things like that. Is it important? To a certain extent, but is it worth it to go dive into this? You know what I mean? And take 5, 10, 15 minutes from practice to just talk about that, I get it. And it makes total sense. It makes total sense.
Sometimes they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
You're going to get an 8-year-old in here. He's going to walk into this gym. This is a beautiful gym. If you guys haven't been to this gym, you need to come to this gym.
Appreciate that.
That kid that he or she's going to walk in here, this is like Dodger Stadium to them. This is like jumping out of an airplane to them. So now you get him or her on that rack and you're trying to show them a simple box squat or back squat or whatever. And they may be a little embarrassed. They don't want to look at you.
Right.
Like you're Michael Jordan to them. You literally, that's what they think, So again, I think reasonable expectations, understanding kids and their makeup. Everybody is unique. Everybody's an individual. Now you try to blend them into an individual team. But some of that stuff, it doesn't matter, like, back at Granite Hills, like, you got to have your shoes clean. Maybe they forgot. Like, why am I not going to play that kid if he just forgot? Or I'm going to stop making them do that or asking them to do that. It's just trimming the fat and learning and moving on but paying attention to it too, and understanding I'm trying to take this team from here and I'm trying to get them here. Now, this may mean 20 wins. It may mean 1. But if I'm moving them, then we're doing our job. They're doing their job.
Right.
Right. Yeah. as a student athlete, right? What's that relationship like between the academics and the athletics, right? The player, and how do you kind of approach that in making sure that they're taking care of business? Certain coaches have different kind of approaches and plans to do that, whether it's study halls and things like that. But, we do, some coaches or some programs do kind of see that struggle of keeping athletes eligible throughout the season, making sure they're going to meet the deadline. So they are going to be eligible for the next 9 weeks or that next quarter, whatever it is. So how do you kind of approach that as a coach and as a director of athletics?
So, and again, I don't know if this will work for everyone, but this worked for me, and we rarely had ineligible players. We had a few, but we rarely had ineligible players, and we talked a lot about it. I didn't do a whole lot of study hall. I didn't do a whole lot of grade check, but I would say, listen, if you don't have these grades, you're not going to be able to play, and I wouldn't make a big deal about it. And I wouldn't lose my patience. I haven't been mad or lost my patience in years, fellas. Like I can't remember the last time I've been mad. But here is the line. And if you can't do this, then you're not going to be here. And listen, fellas, I'm not going to talk to a teacher for you. We're going to move on with or without you. Most of the time they get it done. You can be successful at school. Now, I don't know if you can be, a 4.0 student or whatever, but you can get your schoolwork done. And so, but again, for me, it just became a part of us. Yeah. These are the things that you need to do to play for us and sometimes play for me. You need to do these things. You need to be the young adult and take care of your academics. Now, if you need help, I'll come and help you the best I can, or I'll find somebody that can help you.
Right.
But most of the time, and I hear this as an administrator, well, coach isn't going to let him play because he had to go home and do schoolwork. That's not okay. Like, he or she signed up to play athletics. This is their reasonable practice time. They need to be there. And then what I see on the backside of that is they never go home to do their homework.
You're right.
They go home and they get something to eat and they maybe take a shower. They kind of relax. And a lot of times they do their homework, but it's after that practice time.
Right.
So I never lost perspective on what our role is as a coach. We are trying to use athletics as a platform to get better grades, to stay motivated. And I've had a lot of those players. I really have. And we don't need to get cliche or get into the numbers or say, listen, they wouldn't be a good human if it wasn't for athletics.
Right.
But athletics kept them motivated enough to graduate.
Yeah,
100%.
It kept them motivated enough to get good grades, and our expectations as an athlete anyway is already higher than some other programs. You have to have a 2.0 to play. Some kids aren't academic. And I've had countless players that bust their butt, get a 2.0. I've had, and the same amount of players that just kind of go through the motions, get a 3.0.
Right.
Yeah.
So, again, it was, and we would talk about this. We wouldn't talk about it a lot, but our programs, in my mind, and I hope this bled into the players, they were living, breathing things. That program had emotion, and that program it could be stronger, and on certain days it could be weaker, but it existed. It wasn't just this group of guys getting together for a couple hours a day. Like, the team was more important than the individual. And I would say that to my players lots, that listen, for 2 hours a day, this team means more to me than anything on the planet other than Whitney and my kids, but it definitely means more to me than you do. Now, the other 22 hours of the day is completely opposite. Right. I'll do anything that I can for you unless you should or could be doing it for yourself those other 22 hours.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So, you've overseen a lot of programs.
Mm-hmm.
You've coached a lot of programs. You've been an athletic director of a lot of programs, but now you're sitting at the top of the whole entire district.
Yeah.
You know, what are some challenges and rewards, you know, sitting in that desk now?
The challenges for me is I miss campus life. I still like being around kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do miss coaching a tick. You know, I knew I was getting to the end of my coaching career had I gotten this job or not gotten this job, because I really started to enjoy the games more than practices, and I never felt that way. Had I not got the job, I probably would have stuck around a couple more years. But I knew it was kind of getting to the end. But a challenge for me personally is, you know, you're not around kids as much. Like I said earlier, you don't have that daily interaction or that time to get with coaches and work with them. Sometimes they don't even know that they can ask for it. You know, so creating that relationship with them is important to me. And I think in a grassroots way, if you can create those relationships and establish those relationships, I think things will start to increase. You know, and the rewards of the job is that, you know, I do oversee our athletic programs in a community that means so much to me. Yeah. You know, I've only been away from Porterville for 3 years of my life, you know, and everything that I have in my life is because of athletics. And if we can just get that to a few kids, I mean, the impact is done. Right. You know.
Is that what does, I guess, success look like in your role at this point in your career? Like, obviously when you're coaching baseball, it's not necessarily the wins and the losses, but it's seeing those kids go on and have success, you know, after they graduate, all that stuff. So what does success look like and gratitude look like in your role today?
It's a great question. I don't know if I've had enough time to kind of define that yet in my own head. I know that you're pursuing it. I hope that, you know, I can create relationships enough where a coach can come to me and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or how did you handle that? I would hope that I have a relationship where I can hand some of that stuff off too. You know, we've got a guy out in Strathmore that is putting himself in a category that's elite. You know, and I'm talking on a national scale. I saw them play last night in a regional final, and man, his team is looking sharp. Yeah. You know, so again, we have successful coaches around. And we have impactful coaches, and using them and, you know, somewhat shining them, if you will, and getting them back in front of their kids, that grassroots approach be fantastic. I'd love to say to you, you know, we're putting in this project and we're doing that. And all those things are great, but I don't know if that leads to success. That leads to a great place to go and play.
Sure.
You know, so all the behind the scenes stuff, that you don't want credit for, that you shouldn't get credit for. I feel I think I could probably do a better job with that, kind of connecting with those people and you know, just helping them be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. So, I mean, in a nutshell, you know, what does the future hold for AJ Watts and the Porterville Unified School District as far as the athletic department go?
You know, Porterville Unified, care what anybody says, it's good shape, man. Yeah. Menachie High Cross Country just won 2 Valley Championships.
Yeah, man.
Strathmore won Valley Championship. You know, things are cruising. Strathmore High boys basketball won the Farmersville tournament. Porterville High boys basketball just won the Emmanuel tournament. We had an all-time leading scorer at Menachie a couple weeks ago. Like, things are okay.
Sure.
You know, things are okay. They're moving in the right
boat's
direction.
Rowing, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, for me, like, whatever, it'll be fine. You know, something will come up. It'll be all right.
Yeah. Well, any final words or anything you want to say?
We need more people like you guys in town. You guys are doing a terrific job.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, appreciate
we
that.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do this one for a long time.
Yeah.
Well,
you know, there's a lot of people that want to hear what you had to say because you had the credibility for it.
But your list of participants must be getting thin.
Stop.
No, not in the least bit. But really appreciate the time for you coming down and talking shop with us and sharing the knowledge that you've gained within the last 20 plus years of your career. And, you know, hopefully a lot of coaches, you know, take take tests of this, and they pick something from it that helps their program.
It was really my pleasure. This is fun. This is not work. This is fun.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Thanks AJ for just setting that bar, that standard high with not just athletics, but building programs and just being a good role model in our community. So we appreciate that. Appreciate you taking the time to come on today, and we're looking forward to coaches, parents, and a lot of people to tune into this to take some advice into their own programs or maybe their own children.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because if there's one thing two things that you could take away from listening to Coach Watts is keep it simple.
Yep.
And stay consistent.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
That's
Good
it.
one. All right. Thanks, AJ. Appreciate it.
Of course, fellas. Yep.
Thank you.